In the highlands of Anatolia, a quiet shepherd named Mehmet has always felt the whispers of the wind, subtle warnings others ignore. One winter morning, the wind's guidance becomes more urgent than ever, leading him to avoid a deadly landslide. Was it intuition, fate, or divine intervention? This is the story of how listening closely to unseen forces can save a life, and how miracles often come softly, like a whisper carried on the breeze. Divine intervention isn't always obvious. It's sometimes a quiet whisper that changes everything. Mehmet was born in the highlands of southeastern Anatolia, in a village so small that its dozen white stone houses looked like scattered sheep themselves, huddled against the endless rise of the Taurus mountains. His father said the mountains lived and breathed. His mother said they whispered secrets. Neither imagined their quiet son would one day claim to hear those whispers with unsettling clarity. From the time he first followed his father into the grazing fields, Mehmet sensed things others didn't. He heard meaning in the rustle of dry grasses, in the sudden hush that fell before storms, in the thin, swirling currents that swept across the high passes like unseen messengers. He was shy, gentle, thoughtful, often more comfortable among animals than people. One afternoon, when he was only 7, he sat alone on a sun-warmed boulder overlooking a valley bathed in golden light. The air shifted, first softly, then insistently, until it felt as though the wind wrapped itself around him like a living cloak. A whisper rose within it, thin as a reed's sigh. Home. Just that one word, soft, insistent, unmistakable. Startled, he ran home. Moments after he burst into the courtyard, crying and breathless, a violent hailstorm slammed the valley. The shepherds caught in the open suffered broken bones and torn skin. Mehmet, however, remained untouched. His parents chalked it up to coincidence, but Mehmet knew better. It was the first time he understood that the wind sometimes carried warnings, and that he could hear them. Years passed, seasons turning like pages in a prayer book. Mehmet's ability remained quiet, subtle, more a feeling than a voice. But it guided him in ways that saved animals, avoided storms, and kept him from the kinds of missteps that cost other shepherds dearly. By 17, he had become one of the most dependable herders in the region. His flock flourished, his routes were safe, and though he never boasted, villagers often remarked that Mehmet always seemed to just know where danger waited. He married young, a gentlewoman named Elif, who loved him for his quiet spirit and steady hands. She accepted his strange intuition without question. Some people whispered that the young shepherd was touched by angels. Others muttered that he was a child of the wind. Still others shrugged and said, "Some men simply listen better." Yet even Mehmet didn't fully understand the gift within him. It wasn't constant, it wasn't predictable, but when it mattered, the wind spoke. And in the winter of his 29th year, it would speak louder and more urgently than it ever had before. The winter arrived early that year, weeks earlier than any living person remembered. The first snow fell before the last autumn leaves had finished dropping. Winds howled across the passes with unfamiliar ferocity, and icy fogs clung to the valley floors like trapped spirits. Still, Mehmet needed to graze his flock. Hay was limited, and the mountains, even in harsh seasons, offered patches of hardy grass. On the morning of the incident, the air was biting cold, sharp enough to redden the hands within minutes. Mehmet had planned only a brief excursion into a narrow mountain pass he'd walked hundreds of times. The sky was clear, the wind was calm. There was no reason to fear. Yet barely halfway into the pass, as the path narrowed and the stone walls rose steeply on either side, Mehmet felt it, the subtle shift he recognized from childhood, a tremor in the air, a stirring like breath inhaled through unseen lungs. Then the whisper. But this time it wasn't a word, it was a sound, an urgent rising tremor like fabric tearing in slow motion. He froze. The sheep sensed it too. Their bleats wavered, their hooves stamped nervously. The wind sharpened suddenly, then sliced through the canyon with a single, unmistakable cry. Turn! The word wasn't heard with ears, it was felt with bones. Mehmet didn't question it. He swung his crook, urging the flock to reverse direction in the narrow confines of the pass. It was slow, painfully slow. Sheep balked and bunched up. Mehmet pushed, pulled, coaxed, shouted. The wind grew wild around him. Then he heard the first rumble, a deep, groaning sound like mountains waking from sleep. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He just ran. The rumbling grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls until it became a deafening roar. The sheep panicked, surging forward in a frantic wave of wool and hooves. Mehmet was propelled with them. He stumbled, regained his footing, shouted at them to keep moving. Behind him, the mountain gave way. He didn't turn, but he felt it, felt the air shift as thousands of tons of rock tore free, breaking apart as they thundered downward. The ground shook violently, nearly toppling him. Dust blasted forward in a choking cloud. He pushed the last of the flock through the narrow pass's entrance just as an explosion of shattered stone filled the air behind him. Mehmet was thrown to his knees. When he finally dared to turn, the entire pass was gone, filled to the brim with jagged boulders and pulverized earth. The path he had walked since childhood had vanished beneath a mountain's worth of ruin. Had he hesitated even 30 seconds, he and his entire flock would have been crushed without a trace. His heart hammered. His breath came ragged. The sheep bleated, shaken but alive. Then, slowly, the wind settled. Not silent, not gone, just calm, almost warm, as though it had finished its duty. When Mehmet returned home with his flock unharmed, villagers gathered around him, their breath visible in the cold air, their questions overlapping. "What happened? How did you know? Did you see signs? Was it animals? Rocks? Snow?" Mehmet could have lied, could have kept the truth quiet, hidden behind practicality and circumstance. But the near-death experience had shaken something loose in him, something stiff with years of unspoken wonder. So he told the truth. "The wind warned me." Silence fell, a long, uncomfortable silence. Then an elderly woman crossed herself. A young man muttered a prayer. A few people looked at him with fear, but most looked with awe. For years, they had whispered about his intuition, his uncanny timing, his inexplicable knowledge of storms and routes. Now, the rumor had a root. Some called it a miracle, some called it a blessing, and a few insisted it was divine intervention, an angelic warning sent to protect a good and humble man. Mehmet, however, thought of none of those things. He simply felt overwhelming gratitude and a dawning realization. The wind had always been guiding him, but now it had saved him. Life gradually returned to normal, though villagers treated Mehmet with a new kind of reverence. They sought his guidance more often. They asked him about omens, weather changes, and blessings. Some even asked him to pray for their families. But Mehmet didn't feel like a holy man, only a listener. And one cold evening, while watching the last orange light fade behind the mountains, he sensed the wind again. Not urgent, not warning, but gentle, thankful. He felt the message without hearing it. You listened, and because you listened, you lived. Not everyone in life receives divine intervention. Fewer still recognize it. But Mehmet had heard it since he was a child, and trusted it even when it made no sense. The wind had saved him not because he was powerful or chosen, but because he was willing to hear what others dismissed. Because sometimes miracles come softly. Sometimes warnings arrive as whispers. Sometimes the divine doesn't roar, it breathes. And Mehmet, the quiet shepherd of the Anatolian mountains, would carry that truth with him for the rest of his days. As the wind settled over the ridge and the last traces of twilight faded, Mehmet stood alone beneath a sky wider and more mysterious than he had ever known. The presence was gone, but its message lingered in the air like a promise. He did not yet know what danger would come. He did not know when the village would call for him. But he knew this: he would be ready, because he had always listened. And now he understood why. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If Mehmet's story moved you, if you felt the whisper of something unseen in his footsteps, his courage, or his quiet faith, we invite you to keep walking with us. Like this video, share it with someone who loves stories of fate and divine intervention, and follow Lanes and Lanterns for more real and imagined tales of the mysterious, the miraculous, and the deeply human. Your support helps keep these lanterns lit. Until the next path, keep listening.